introducing you to the work of one Bradbury Cort Lindahl. I looked in my records. I've been reading his work since around 2016, and I think he's been at it professionally since around 2008. I'll find out for sure if he gets on this program here. I had him originally scheduled for today, but there must have been a mix-up so far as the date and time. But I do have a lot of material here that I can review for you that will give you an idea, a flavor, not more than a flavor of his work. It's very important. It's really valuable, and I'll explain. Oh, at least a half a dozen reasons why he deserves more attention as an author. Now, you may wonder why I'm dressed for the occasion. I just wanted to put this out here. I just came to this um, amusing. Maybe it's pregnant with meaning. I don't know, but I made this connection between this open road model Stetson hat. I'll take it off now. It's getting kind of warm. It's a 40% beaver made in USA. John B. Stetson. It's real. It's even got a little holographic stamp in here. I've had it for a number of years, but I have a new conspiracy that I want to add to the JFK assassination, tongue in cheek, but there might be some validity to it. In this case, the open road model Stetson appears through the Kennedy assassination and its aftermath. First of all, it's worn iconically by Lyndon Baines Johnson, who, as you know, was vice president and then became president after JFK was moved aside. And there have been at least 2 or 3 books that have been written. I think the first one I read was by, I think can't remember the author. It'll come to me, but there's about 2 or 3 major books that have pointed the finger at LBJ as being one of the principal architects of the JFK assassination. And he used to sport the open road Stetson. In fact, when he'd go on these campaign stops, he'd appear, he'd be shuttled in by helicopter. He'd throw his hat out there as sort of a gesture of magnanimity. But he always had someone on the ground to fetch the hat because they're not cheap, and they'd return it to the owner. And by the way, his hat was auctioned off, I don't know, a while back ago. And yeah, it's the one that LBJ wore himself, and it was $5,000. It went for $5,000. I thought it would be worth more than that, but it went for $5,000. And here's another example. Here is you can't make out the faces, and you can barely make out LBJ on the left, but he's wearing the open road Stetson model, and JFK is to his right, or is to his left and to our right. And I think this is in the state capitol in Austin. I'm not sure, but they're sitting side by side. And there's more. We'll get into the heart of the story today in a moment. Here is a picture of our beloved martyred John Fitzgerald Kennedy, president, who is holding this very same model. It hasn't changed in the decades. It's still available. I'm not a stockholder of Stetson hats. I do like them. I think they're a classic Americana. I also have a straw version of this. I like the straw hats as well. It gets hot up here in I'm in the north part of California. It gets cold. This is good weather to wear my open road. In fact, I think I'll wear it out this evening when I go out to eat. But here's John F. Kennedy, and this is Jacqueline Kennedy to the left, if you can't make her out. And he's holding the open road hat, the Stetson, and it was given to him by supporters, which were far and few between down in Texas. He was not on friendly turf when he was down in Dallas on that fateful day, but it was given to his supporters down there, and they implored him to please put the hat on, put the hat on. And John F. Kennedy, who had an aversion to hats, and as you know, he was even at the inauguration, and this was a break from protocol. He didn't even wear a top hat when he was sworn in as president, so he didn't wear a hat. And he didn't put it on. And I guess this is the result, if you want to be conspiratorial about it. This is Officer Jim Laville. I think I might be mispronouncing his name, Lavelle or Laville or Lavelle. You can look it up. He's the man on the left in the light suit. And I think he was with the Texas Rangers, or he might have been with the Dallas Police Department, but he was a peace officer, let's say. But you can see he's wearing the Stetson open road hat. And there's Jack Ruby on the right, back towards us. And of course, you recognize Lee Harvey Oswald the moment that he himself was assassinated. So there you go. That's the open road Stetson hat. Okay, I thought that'd be an interesting piece of history here. And what I'm about to show you here goes way beyond the trivial. And I would go so far as to say that it's a shame he couldn't be here, but it gives me an opportunity to sing his praises, because otherwise it wouldn't be, taking his screen time away from him. But Mr. Bradbury Cort Lindahl, I believe, is one of the more important independent writers, truly independent writers, who is, let me put myself back on the screen. Sorry about that. Who's one of the truly independent writers and researchers who I would argue is, it's not going to happen overnight, but I do see it happening fairly quickly, within less than a generation. And I'm going to be one of the main promoters of this. And when I speak of this, I might as well tell you, I want to put this type of research into the K through 12 curriculum in the schools here in America, and also at the university curriculum. And I think organically, if we revision American history, going back to the colonial times, pre-Columbian times, right, pre-colonial, as well as during the Republic, after the formation of the American Republic, if this type of independent research gets assimilated and we're able to break the monopoly of the schools of education at Columbia, Berkeley, University of Texas, it's a closed shop, right? They're the ones who are responsible for certifying teachers K through 12, and of course, people at the graduate level as well. And the curriculum, as we all know, is, especially since we have a bunch of repeaters saying, critical race theory, okay, you know what? You're not coming up with solutions. Here is a solution. Let's look at American history, colonial and post-colonial, or the Republic era. I'm not going to use the term post-colonial. That's been taken by mostly South Asians with PhDs saying, I'm post-colonial. What about my history? No, there's just a bunch of rich people who got PhDs. And they made a little movement for themselves in order to insert themselves into the academic world. It's called post-colonialism. So I don't use that term because of that, for anybody here who's familiar with it. But I'm firmly convinced that the work of Cort Lindahl, more specifically, is going to help revision the historiography at a radical level, from the root level. That's what radical means. And we're going to overcome a lot of problems in American society. It's not just a curricular matter. We're going to overcome a lot of political problems. We're going to overcome a lot of political, economic problems if we fully study the implications. And it takes a lot of work, believe me, because I have training in this in the books, and I'll show you a few right now. I have a couple of out on loaner to people that I trust, but I do have a number of volumes here at home that I'm reading. But it does take a lot of not training, but it takes a lot of patience. You're going to have to do a lot of work on your side. And that's really what's really valuable about it, is that it's going to force you to be invested in the work. Now, it's not drudgery, because everything in these books has relevance, not just romantically or philosophically, but existentially. Everything that you will find in these books of his has direct relevance to you personally, your family, your nuclear family, your extended family, and the families of families, the American family itself. right? Immigrant stock, supposed Mayflower people, native people. And when I say native, this also includes people from the Asian part of the world. Yes, Cort Lindahl writes in the Ming people. There was no China back then. There's people of the Ming Empire. He writes the Ming people into the national history of America, and that's something that most indie people and definitely academic types do not even consider to be legitimate. And that's going to be the main struggle for authors like Cort Lindahl. I'm sure he's used to it by now. He's been at this for over 10 years. Is that the receptivity is limited by the orthodoxy. And of course, that's nothing new. If you're in the live stream, you know the kind of weird looks you get when you may bring up something in polite company. And, we know that conspiracy theory was a CIA construct. The public, in our favor, is awakening, and they're learning this material themselves. And I'm sure that the general public, if they start reading work like Cort Lindahl, they will say, "Hey, I'm invested in this issue as well," and organically, without any proselytization, without mocking them, without pretending we're superior to their low level of understanding and awareness, it's going to happen. All right. So it happens by me exposing to the larger public to this work here. Now, I was going to let him introduce himself, but since he's not here, I'll just very briefly, because you can read this on your own, and it helps me understand why there's such a breadth and depth of knowledge and experience that he brings to his research and to his books. Right, here's one of his earlier ones, or more recent ones, but it's actually came out in 2016, so it's been out a while. And I don't know if you can see it on the screen here, but this is a good starter for you if you don't know his work. He has avid readers all over the place, but I see he doesn't get a lot of views. I think he's being shadow banned, which is really a testament to the destabilizing effect he has on the orthodoxy, right? And it's by the orthodoxy, it's the type of education that they're teaching today, and the type that we boomers that were exposed to. But this is titled "The Secrets of Edgar Allan Poe, the Kensington Ruins." Some of you might know that, RUNE, and the Beale Treasure Revealed. All right, so I say it's a good start because unlike his other books, it's under 100 pages. Yeah, it's like 60, less than 70 pages. And his books are a bargain so far as the price is concerned. And you can get it at Bezos.com. We won't frown, look down on you if you go to the retailer that ate the world, because that's where you'll find Cort Lindahl's books. But he was born in 1961, Long Beach, California. He's an American by nationality. And I'll just skip over some of the specifics, but he grew up in an Air Force family, military family. So that to me explains why he's so well traveled and is acquainted and comfortable with different regions of the United States of America. As most of you know, it's a big country and seems like there's countries within the country, but he sees it all as a organic whole, but it's a organic whole whose history has been occulted or occluded or not brought into the K through 12 official textbook storyline that we've been exposed to. He's got a broad background. There's no indication of his academic background, which to me, if you've been looking at my channel for 2 years, doesn't really, I mean, I don't care. I don't mind. It's amateurs have a lot more to say in many cases than your so-called academic types, because their livelihood, their professional status, and their egos are bound up with it. But anyway, he does his research. He's out there in his truck, his Ford F-350 or 450. I don't know the model. He's out there. He's not a desk jockey. He probably does more field research than your average academic type. And on that basis, and the incredible book learning that he has, which is one of the questions I had for him, I just want to where's your archive? Where did all this material come from? Because his his books and his talks as well, and you can find them. Just put that on, put the keyword in there, Cort Lindahl, Lindahl, and you'll come up with tons of material that go back years. But one of the questions I had for him is, what archive is he working for? And I have a pretty good archive of out of print books myself, and most of this is not commercially available anymore. It's been taken off the shelves at the university, and it's not available. You might think Bezos.com has everything, but it doesn't, right? But Cort Lindahl's work reflects, and he doesn't have any bibliographic information, right? I'm not dinging him on that, but it would be helpful to people who would like to go down the same path. And he's had influence, by the way, and I'll get to that in a moment, beyond not in academia for what it's worth, but other researchers are following in his path, which is a good sign. I also want to see the next generation of learners to follow this path, right? The K through 12 people, the younger the better, from kindergarten, first grade. My fondest hope is for them. It'll probably start at home schools. Public education, as you don't need to be told this, is a cesspit of political orthodoxy, and it's incurable. So we have to start our own institutions rather than complain and whine about, oh yeah, the libtards run the university, blah blah blah, woof woof. So I want to see the 6, 7, 8-year-old, 10-year-olds, all the way up to high school level, out there in the field, right, in their own hometowns, right? There's history everywhere, literally buried right in your own backyard, or in your neighborhood. And you're going to learn from probing around with your little shovel, your pail, your sifter, very rudimentary tools. You're going to learn maths, you're going to learn architecture, you're going to learn archaeology, and you're going to learn the real history of America and of humanity, of the human race. Okay. And it's going to be grounded, there's a play on words there. You're going to dig into the ground. It's going to be grounded in empirical reality. It's going to be science, not ideology. All right. I'm sorry, I'm going off on my rant about education, but I think this is one of the more important contributions that I can make. If I had him here, I would say, Mr. Lindahl, have you thought of adapting your work into a turnkey K through 12 curriculum that homeschool operators, teachers, families can just buy it, that's understandable at the respective grade levels, and then learn from that basis? I think it's an incredible business opportunity. I'm not going to do it. I have other, but I'm just putting this idea out there for people who are in education or doing homeschooling. This is an opportunity for you. By the way, my students used to chide me in lecture. They said, "Professor, you're giving away all these free ideas. These are all golden." So, I said, "Well, I have a lot of ideas, and number one, I can't follow up on all of them, but my larger purpose is to show you that you don't have to accept orthodoxy. You can come up with your own ideas. In fact, if you're in the professions, whatever profession is, or if you're in the crafts, it's originality that gets rewarded, not repetition." Right. Repetition is okay once you've got a new model or something, then you can crank it out for a while. But it's creativity that really helps us evolve as a society. And I want to teach students that, because they were locked into this static model of what knowledge is. And the work of Mr. Lindahl breaks out of that, because he himself embodies someone who's gone as literally, in a double meaning, he's blazed his own path in acquiring this new knowledge. It's very exciting, and you will be excited too, and you will recognize yourself, your own family, your own bloodline, your own lineage in these stories. I certainly can, and from the Asian world, and of course the European, the Anglo-American nexus. We learn that, but. And he's cognizant and respectful of the native, of course, the indigenous contributions as well. And he's also, I should state it at the outset, he's also has a keen sensitivity to bogus historiography, such as the Kensington Rune, as I've already alluded to. He doesn't outright say, he's very nice, he doesn't say it's a fake, like some experts have said, but he's also pointing out the fact that history is often manipulated for political and economic purpose. In the Kensington, some of you might be offended by that. And by the way, since his name is Lindahl, I thought maybe he had a Scandinavian background, so I thought he was going to be pro Kensington Ruin. But no, he says it's a 19th century. He didn't say fabrication. That's my reading of it, but it's not authentic. The so-called Vikings or Norsemen didn't come to North America. They might have come here, right? But they didn't come here with an intent to establish permanent settlements like the English did, like the French did, right? That, you've heard about the New Atlantis and Albion, New Albion, and you've heard about the charters that were granted by the Queen of Spain, and same with China. China was, the Ming people were here in what is now North America, probably parts of the Caribbean, the lower eastern seaboard of what is now the United States, Mexico too, and California, definitely. There's archaeological evidence, there's material evidence that they were here. And Cort Lindahl talks about some of the more later influences. But they did not, the Ming people did not come to this part of the world to settle it and to colonize it. Whereas these other groups had an explicit intention of plunking down the roots here and establishing New Atlantis, right? You've heard that term, Bacon, Francis Bacon, and John Dee. John Dee had an idea for Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, we're going to colonize the world. That was their explicit intention, and it's not just a curious historical fact. 400 years later, we're still operating on that mindset. It's more than a mindset. It's a military political system that we're foundering on. That's four centuries old, and it's being tested right now in Ukraine. Right, and there's a previous war fought in the Crimean War on that basis, on the basis of these clash of empires. And contrary to what you hear in indie media, the clash of empires not between China and the United States. One of my commenters earlier said, "Oh, you hate Alex Jones." I don't hate Alex Jones. He's been instrumental in helping to educate the American and the world public, educate itself on the true history of America. I just don't like the sort of lazy Chacam sort of race anti-Chinaman race baiting that Americans tend to fall back on whenever we're going through hard times. The problem is larger than that, and I'm sure he realizes that. But in order for him to escape a lot of pounding by the banker establishment, who are the Anglo-American people that Lindahl writes about, I think he has to do the anti-China sort of token. So I understand that, and I can roll with it, right? Because unlike 1888 or 1882, when there was anti-Chinese legislation passed by the U.S. Congress, right? We're having a big debate. Oh, it's over now because McCarthy is now installed as Speaker of the House. But in 1882, if you know your national history, Chinese, because they didn't have any political power either here or overseas, they were excluded. They were barred from entry into the United States. It's different in 2023. I gave a talk on Pasadena, and you see in the San Gabriel Valley, there's a lot of multimillionaires from China, of Chinese origin, first immigration, first generation in that area. So we're talking about different historical realities. So, in a way, the people like Mike, the health. The fear monger, the fear ranger. He's the guy that said we needed to go to an immediate lockdown. This is about 3 years ago. And his wife's Taiwanese, so I'm sure that has something to do with it, because there's a big opposition between Taiwan, China, and Hong Kong. Very simplistic. I'm going to go into this, at some future talk. But we're in a different space here, and Lindahl is very much aware of it, and I think I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he was a quote unquote military brat. His family moved around all over the place, and he has a much broader perspective than the parochial worldview that most of us have, including myself, I'd have to say. Because man, the material that he's presented is an eye opener for me, and I'm grateful for the education that he's provided me. Before I can, well, let me just, I'm being long winded here. Let's just, if you haven't seen him, let's just get a little flavor for the radical work he's doing. Radical doesn't mean left wing always. It doesn't mean Democratic Party, right? It doesn't mean Marxist. Radical means root. So anything Americana being promoted today, like an Americana curriculum, that's considered radical because we're going back to our roots, baby. Yeah, we're going to find gold too. We don't even need the private Central Reserve or the banker cabal or the WEF. We have all these riches and this wealth here on native soil. That's, well, you already know that, but there's all these institutions that have built themselves on it, and they're going to crumble. But they're only going to crumble if we start reading the real history. Here we go.
One of the greatest lost treasures of the world is the temple treasure of Jerusalem. No one knows the whereabouts of this storied treasure today. The temple treasure has inspired the stories of several other lost treasure myths and legends. Here we will examine an alternative version of the story that involves how this treasure was part of the founding of the United States of America. Jewish contributions to the formation of the United States have been somewhat overlooked. Is America the promised land? A great deal of understanding may become available by examining the influences of a man named Jacob Becker in the foundation of the new country. Jacob Becker was aware of the ancient traditions that did indeed affect the symbolic and historical interpretation of real history. Here, a new truth is exposed with regard to how the American Revolution was funded and originally inspired by this secret or obscure path of initiation and information. Here, in the words of author and researchers James Becker and Ken Bauman, a new truth starts to emerge. The ancient and mysterious sect of Essenes may have had an impact on American history. Jacob Becker had become constrained by deeply held religious traditions belonging to the Essene sect. They memorized the history, the lineage that you were able to learn in detail before the Bible went modern and eliminated this burden of reading. The Torah and Bible do not account for the wisdom that was assigned to King Solomon. The Essenes are responsible for the Dead Sea Scrolls, so they were familiar with the importance of writing. The 12 disciples of Christ were most likely all Essenes, and were also most probably those who were motivated to write the scrolls of the New Testament. The Pharisees and Sadducees are Jewish sects that wrote the Torah. The Essenes would memorize the Torah and kept copies that they could use for memorization. King Solomon's wisdom reflects how he accomplished an important task that was kept secret for over 3,000 years.
Okay, check out this figure here. This was a new name for me, Chaim Solomon, and he was one of the funders of the American Revolution. And one of the important points that I noticed right off the bat, and this is one reason why I like Lindahl, because of his expansive knowledge, is that unlike a lot of indie researchers and people who we might consider to be conservative, he's not anti-Jew, right? He embraces Judaism as part of the foundations of what later became the American public, right? So, let's forget Friedman Bank and Jeffrey Epstein and Leslie Wexner and the Wolves of Wall Street. That is epiphenomenal. That's like a temporary aberration from the colonial the so-called New Jerusalem, which America has often been called. So if we reunite with that history, we reconnect with it. There's a lot of hope for our country, for here in America, the United States of America. And I think that's also the message, one of the many messages that Rabbi Jonathan Cahn has for us. We have turned away. And by the way, that Jesus was Essene, supposedly, right? I agree with the scholarship. I think it's compelling enough for me to say, yeah, he was part of that Essene sect, SECT. He was a priest or rabbi, a Reb teacher from that. And according to Lindahl, that's like foregrounded in the origins of what later became the United States of America. Okay, so let's just move beyond that. You can check it out on your own on YouTube. That's a really good one, but it's a radically revisioning, and really what it means is a revisiting of the true foundations. He calls it geomantics because he uses, as we'll see in a moment, a lot of insights that were developed through the uh, thinkers of old. And by old, we're talking only a couple hundred years ago, a couple centuries, not King Solomon. Sure, some of those principles were passed down to the modern age, but we're talking about during the age of European exploration or colonization, that navigational and surveying technologies and science came into being. And he does Cort Lindahl does a really good job in explaining how that developed and why it developed and what inspired it. And it wasn't all about grabbing the gold either. We're in a really rough patch right now when it's like a fire sale. Everybody in a position to snatch and grab. They're doing it right now because they're seeing an existing political economic system uh, in the process of slow motion collapse, kind of like the 9/11 twin towers, the financial towers that went down, right? Um, and a lot of people think that by default it's going to go into the Great Reset. It doesn't have to be that way, though. This is an opportunity against the so-called Great Reset that we're looking at here. That Cort Lindahl is laying out a very, very solid empirical. By that I mean archaeological, of the material culture, as well as the written record, biographies, testimonials, compacts, documents. In other words, he's laying it all out. You can draw that from his work. And that's really my contribution, is to kind of tease out some of the latent possibilities that are in the large body of work done by Cort Lindahl here. Okay, that's one reason. There's also more personal reason. I think he spent a lot of time living in California. And he shows it in the type of research that he's done on my neck of the woods, which is in the northern part of California. There are many Californias. It's not all LA. And even LA, as you know, is not just all LA. There's also Pasadena. And by the way, that would have been one of the questions that I would ask Cort Lindahl. What type of intel do you have on the city of Pasadena in California? Because my argument is that that's heavily steeped in the whole Rosicrucian tradition, the Pasadena Tournament of Roses with the Freemasonics. And we're being distracted by these name checkers. Oh yeah, Jack Parsons, Caltech, Werner von Braun. By the way, I only had one bonehead who name checked those people because of my admonition that we're moving past the same old, the echo chamber. We know the catechism, all right? We're breaking new ground here. But anyway, I would have asked about Pasadena, and it's possible, what I think, and this is new to me, this is my insight, right? Check out my previous talk on the Pasadena Bio Parade, the Rose Parade. You got all them queen bees, right? They're jostling for that one position. And you got this certain elite that controls that part of the San Gabriel Valley, not just Pasadena, but Altadena and some very, very wealthy parts, and powerful, politically powerful, connected. And that's to get away from the Hollywood-centric view of California, of Los Angeles County, all right? We like the celebrity gossip. We like to watch Harvey Levin on TMZ, but that's only a small part of the picture. That's the glitz, the glitter. Glitz is a Yiddish word, by the way. Remember, my name is Shlomo for 2022 because I'm going to break into comedy just like Karen Johnson, otherwise known as Whoopi Goldberg. All right, so he also deals with my neck of the woods, and not well. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive north of me is the majestic Mount Shasta. And I don't need to go into it. Most of you know that there's a whole mythos around it and New Age, and as well as being an archaeological marvel, right? With all the different, because we're talking about gold country here too. I live in gold country right here, right by the Sacramento River. It's one of and the Sacramento River has its origins up there in Shasta County, and it comes all the way down right outside my window here. It's very high right now. I checked it out. The levels are very, very high, the water, which is good, but threatening as well, because when the levee breaks, watch out, inundation. So Cort Lindahl has spent a lot of time, and he doesn't get caught up in the usual Lemurian mythos, and I'm not making fun of it, and the hollow earth theory. You've heard it all. He doesn't get wrapped on. He deals with the empirical realities of Shasta and the personalities that settled the communities around them, places like Chico, California, which I've been to a few times. And after reading his material, his books, and then watching his videos, I see it through different eyes, and it makes perfect. It squares with what I've seen personally. Same with some of his other visits. And like I said, he's a boots on the ground guy. He's not a desk jockey who just spins these tales. So let's just get a flavor, because I'm already starting to run behind, of his explorations in the Shasta area, Mount Shasta.
Welcome to Mysteries and Legends of Northern California, Mount Shasta Revealed. I'm your host, Cort Lindahl. Here in episode 4, we're going to put together a lot of the mysteries we've been looking at and see how the Chico area relates to the legacy of Sir Francis Bacon and the strange street plan of Washington, D.C.
The diamond chessboard plan of Chico is a key factor to consider when looking at the alternate or hidden history of Northern California. In the past, we have speculated that the plan of Chico was a reference to the diamond-shaped plan of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was planned by famous Society of the Cincinnati member Pierre L'Enfant, along with a panel that consisted of Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and a man named Andrew Ellicott. Ellicott was one of the premier astronomers and land surveyors of the Revolutionary War period and beyond. Some of his direct ancestors had made swords for the staff of General Washington, while other ancestors had been astronomers and famous clockmakers in England prior to the family coming to the United States. Andrew Ellicott was the man who originally surveyed the diamond-shaped 10-mile square of the original District of Columbia. He and his crew had been the actual individuals to have installed the stone boundary markers denoting the District of Columbia that can be seen to this day. Ellicott is also noted for having an African-American man named Benjamin Banneker help him with the astronomical calculations that aided in the accurate placement of the boundary and its associated stones. Ellicott would also go on to finish the design of the streets after L'Enfant withdrew his skills in this task. In addition to the boundaries of the city, Andrew Ellicott was the man who actually laid out the original street plan of Washington, District of Columbia, that has inspired so much speculation and analysis over the years. It is likely that Ellicott was privy to the secrets of the streets of Washington, D.C., as well as many other talismanic aspects and symbols of the new country. It appears that the diamond symbol of Chico and its street plan are related to the same tradition that Ellicott, Jefferson, Washington, and Madison had valued. Are there any indications that there is more to the similarity of the plans of Chico and Washington, D.C.? The answer to that question may astound and amaze any fan of alternate or hidden history.
That would be me and you, fans of alternate and hidden history. It's not hidden, it's there. It's hidden in plain sight if it's hidden at all. And we're going to recuperate it and we're going to reintegrate it into our sense of national self-knowledge. And it's something crossed my mind as I was watching the section on the layout of Washington, D.C. The January, I have the report, by the way. It's huge. I haven't read it all, but it's huge. It's been published by the U.S. printing office. But the reason why the power elite, including those in the Republican Party, have their knickers in a twist about January 6th is not so much about the election contestation, but it's the idea of so many Americans turning out in force spontaneously. It was not a conspiracy. Spontaneously, word of mouth, of course, and social media said, "Yeah, so that's our district. It's not the district of oligarchs there." They said, "We've got it wrapped up." What do? They put a big giant fence around it very soon because they thought that they were a government within a government, right? The District of Columbia. But the people, the American people said, this is our public space and we're going to voice our opposition to this illegitimate, unlawful, quote unquote, election that went down. So and of course, we've seen, this is something to celebrate. We've seen that the government, well, it's not really the government, it's the oligarchs with its that's controlling our people's government. You see that their attempt at the propaganda story failed. That failed. It's fizzled out. There might be some people that still go to jail for it. I'm not saying that these people won't be prosecuted, but by and large, the American public, even your leftists, aren't really paying attention to that anymore. They moved on to Ukraine, promoting them at the expense of Russia. So to give you some idea of the local California history, if you look at, and I encourage you to look at this on YouTube, some familiar names will come up. William Randolph Hearst, right? All the movers and shakers of earlier, that is late 19th century primarily, and early 20th century California and national history that are laid out there. And the important point is that all these high-level individuals have been initiated into schools of knowledge that your average Joe, like myself, your immigrant peoples, or even working class Anglo-Saxon people, your Irish laborers who came west to help build the infrastructure of the state of California, people from China, immigrants, right? They have their own societies. You heard of the Molly Maguires, right? You've heard about the Tong and all that. It's universal, but these organizations like the Society of Cincinnatus had the firepower, but they also had the numerical superiority that would allow them to vanquish people like the Modoc people, the tribe Modocs of the Modoc War. That's another story altogether. So we've got intertribal warfare going on. You have all these different groups that have their own secret societies, their own political, economic systems, kind of duking it out. And that's really the history of the modern world, right? And I have a comment about that right now, if I may interject this, and that in reading Cort Lindahl's work, and this also squares with where I'm going, because I'm no longer, even though I knew most of the principal people who devised what is now called critical race theory, right? I've repudiated that. Ironically, on the Alex Jones show, I called it weaponized multiculturalism. This is about 6 or 7 years ago. So it's a blight upon our land. It's also misinformation. It's not science. It's not social science. It's not empirical science. It's ideology again that fits into the agenda of the larger global takeover that's in full swing right now. So one of their key terms, the other side, right, is racism or even race, right? The race concept is historical in nature, right? A couple of modern thinkers articulate the term, and yeah, there are races. There are people have distinct genotype or phenotypic features. One of my commenters calls it melanin, right? He was an Afrocentrist. I can tell by his use of the word melanin, right? The people with less melanin are called the ice people. This is from Francis Cress Welsing, by the way. And of course, the melanated people are the blacks, who are supposedly the superior race. Every group has like some sense of, especially in the modern era, some sense of people that have African descent are not free of that as well. So the point is here, I'm going to replace the concept and even the everyday parlance of racism. I'm going to expunge that from our vocabulary. You could use it if you want. It's going to date you, though. It's going to like saying groovy, man. That's like 60s, right? So race, that's so early 21st century. When I'm going to replace a concept, and it's a multisyllabic, so we might have to come with an abbreviated version, but it's not so much racism, it's consanguinity. You know what consanguinity is? Sanguine means blood. Sanguinity is the bloodlines, and con means together. These people who run the world, and this is true whether it's in America or it's in China, have a notion of blood bondedness, and that's what it's a fancy, consanguinity is a fancy way of saying that. Whether it's true or not, scientific or not, doesn't really matter. It's the fact that they believe that they are of these bloodline. Read Bloodlines of the Illuminati by Fritz Springmeier, another really fine independent researcher. Co-author Cisco Wheeler, I believe, yeah. But Fritz Springmeier is definitely worth exploring there. But you'll have to take it further, like we're doing right here, right? So it's not race; it's about consanguineous, right? And if they have to use racial differences, the people in power, in order to say, okay, no more Chinamen because they're yellow, right? Or they, whatever they want to arbitrarily pick out as distinguishing them from the Anglo-Saxon people, they'll use it. But the purpose there is to keep the bloodline pure, not racially pure, but genealogically pure is more accurately put. Anyway, I'm not splitting hairs here. I think this new concept of interethnic, interracial, quote unquote, tensions can be thrown out when we see what really is the motor for American history and conquest and occupation as well. Okay, now let me move to another phase of it. I'm not going to belabor the point, but Cort Lindahl, he's a boots on the ground empirical researcher. I consider him a scientist. He fits all the criteria of what science is and how science is done methodologically. So I call him a scientist. He might not, feel that's even necessary, but I'm laying it all here. And he visits the sites, including this temple up in Oroville, California. He knows California like no other person that I know of that's on YouTube. That is, oro, of course, is Espanol for gold, and you know what ville means. And the gold connection, of course, is that the contemporary Chinese people were brought in at large numbers for gold extraction. And you know that already. And you know the railroad story, right? Okay, and I'm mentioning this is because that's typically all we are allowed to know about China. And that's why you have Alex Jones saying, oh, yeah, China tried to take over, right? Because they're looking at a very thin slice of Ming imperial history, right? And I'll explain that they have a claim on California, but they never wanted an overseas empire. They wanted to maintain the imperial wealth within. They claimed the emperors of Ming said, we don't need any other country. And in fact, they were the dominant economic system, the dominant country of their time, even bigger than Great Britain until, you know what happened when Britain got into the opium and brought the silver out, then the roles reversed. Right. That was not that long ago. But up until then, they were in the catbird seat. I'm talking about the Ming Empire. So here's Cort Lindahl up at the Oroville Temple.
Hi, I'm Cort Lindahl. Today we're here at the Oroville, California Chinese Temple. Stick around to check it out. Hi, I'm Cort Lindahl. Let's take a tour of the Oroville Chinese Temple. The latter half of the 19th century, there were as many as 10,000 Chinese in the Oroville, California area. Just as with many of those that arrived in the area, they came primarily in search of gold. Starting with the California Gold Rush in 1849, the Chinese arrivals in Oroville for the first 20 years were only men, since they were not allowed to bring their families. Most of these were from the Canton and Shanghai provinces. They brought little with them except their rich heritage, the will to succeed, and the desire to return home wealthy. Shortly after arriving in Oroville, around 1850, the Chinese population pooled existing resources and built the first Chinese temple in the area. This temple, constructed of wood, burned down, as did a second rebuilt structure. The third structure and furnishings, funded by the Tongxi Emperor and Empress of China, was built of red brick acquired from Palermo, California, and was completed in September 1863.
Okay, you can watch the rest for yourself. Yeah, there are Chinatowns like that all over California. Most of them were burnt down. They were burnt out. Nevada City has an old alleyway that they call Chinatown, but those people were driven out by terrorism. And of course, eventually the national laws were changed by the U.S. Congress to make sure that people from the Celestial Kingdom were not allowed in. Now, that's our perception, and I know this, right? That's the popular perception that's been allowed on media, television and film and Netflix even. I mean, that film, Crazy Rich Asians, some people say, oh, how wonderful, but it's a caricature. It's a cartoon. And I know this because I'm a scholar of this. I taught Asian American Studies for 21 years at the University of California, Davis. I wrote a book. It's called Monitored Peril. Monitor is in television monitor and peril is in yellow peril, subtitled Asian Americans and the Politics of TV Representation. So you only know the Hop Sing version of the Chinaman. You do not know the Ming version, and therefore you're not adapting to the current reality where China is on an equal plane, if not farther ahead in terms of foreign policy than the United States of America. And I decided I'm going to do a talk on that separately because I realize that people don't realize that China is the one country that's devoted to economically developing the dark continent. Right? This is no Joseph Conrad type of strategy where you're just going to plunder everything for the Belgian Congo people, right? The owners, the Saxe-Coburg and the House of Habsburg. No, China's investing tons of money to develop Black Africa, and most Americans don't know that. This is why Alex Jones does, oh, China don't want InfoWar to succeed. Buy my supplements. Yeah. And that's, by the way, that's really the mindset of a lot of people supposedly on our side. Okay, because they're still dealing, they're locked in television land. So anyway, my job is to break us out of that so that we as a nation can move forward and benefit by helping other countries. I mean, why are we sending that? Well, I know why. It's a money laundering operation. It gets kicked back to people who are allocating our money to the Ukrainian oligarchs. But why not devote that money to overseas investment in Africa, like China's doing? Okay, enough for that rant. I'll save that for another talk, which we really need. I didn't realize that most people don't have a clue that China. You know, the name of this book is called China's Second Continent, and that's literally the truth. They're all over the place, and we are being kept oblivious to it because there's some oligarchs who are financing it, but it's a little dark secret. So they'll give money to the InfoWars operation and say, "Oh, InfoWar," and whoever else is on there, right? Yeah, I mean, Ben Shapiro, it could be Stu Peters, the auctioneer. They're all driven by that same paid off myopia about China. Here's China in the old school, the Ming period, right? And Lindahl is onto this. He doesn't really write about it yet, but I'm sure he will.
There are many theories about pre-Columbian contact between the Old and New World for various cultures: West Africa, India, Egypt, Wales. But as mentioned, the only one proven true is the Norse Viking discovery. But what draws attention to the notion that China could have done it is how very possible it would have been for them. The main theory, which we're seeking to prove or disprove, is the one made popular by Gavin Menzies in his book called 1421, the year China discovered America. 1421 is, of course, 71 years before Columbus landed in the Caribbean. To start, let's look at what was going on in China in this time period. In the early 15th century, the Ming dynasty had risen in China, replacing the Yuan dynasty, which was a remnant of the Mongolian Empire. The Yongli Emperor, whose name was Zhu Di, ruling from 1402 to 1424, wanted to expand China's horizons, in a manner of speaking, and he did much of this militarily. He firstly kind of reconstructed the Great Wall of China, but then turned his attention to the seas and China's navy. The main product of his naval buildup was what is referred to as the treasure fleet. This consisted of a massive fleet containing individually massive ships, which would be sent on treasure voyages around much of the Old World. Leading the treasure fleet was Admiral Zheng He. The purpose of these expeditions, the treasure voyages, was not merely curiosity or exploration or anything like that, and that is worth keeping in mind. There was a clear intent with the treasure fleet to help China establish relations, dominate trade in the Old World, and grow to become a superpower. The Chinese were not screwing around. Here is a comparison, for example, between one of Columbus's ships and one of Zheng.
Do you see that comparison? That's either the Nina, the Pinta, or the Santa Maria with the Templar cross, by the way. And that's one of the Chinese Ming Dynasty super ships, which were plying the ocean long before Cristoforo Colombo. You understand that? And they came right off the coast here, which is what is now California. So where's the historiography there? And this is why I say this is going to radicalize and revamp the whole K through 12 history, and we're going to get rid of all the xenophobia, right, and the residual consanguineous mentality that the elites practice, that they've enforced on we slave population, right? The natural tendency for we proletariats, if you want to put it in Marxian terms, right? We the true explorers of the world, is to trade. We're into commerce. We're into like bartering and haggling, but the the higher level people invent these different pseudosciences of eugenics, dysgenics, or even racial theory, CRT, in order to convince us that the world is really a place full of hostile individuals that we need to kill. Of course, now, we're doing auto suicide or suicide rather, auto eugenics. So it gives you an idea there. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just very briefly show you some of the books. Don't be intimidated. They're readable and accessible. My only criticism would be the lack of indexing and lack of bibliographical information for people who want to know more. But books like this, okay, we're looking at something about along the lines of 450 pages, and this is a large format book, right? The title is The Geographic Mysteries of Sir Francis Bacon, right? You know about the New Atlantis, and you know the whole story there, so I don't just rehearse it. But it's full of illustrations, graphs. He's a good writer. It's a good prose, and he connects it with the colonial, the national, and world history. And he talks about the advanced science that these certain groups held amongst themselves, right? And the introduction to this talk here, self-introduction with Cort Lindahl, he talks, for example, about the Society of Cincinnati, or more properly, it's called the Society of the Cincinnati or Cincinnati. And what that was, he didn't mention this, but those were all officers who were veterans of the American Revolution, headed by George Washington. That was their own group that helped to maintain the power that they won from the mother country, England, which they later, they never really severed that relationship, completely. But the Society of Cincinnati is that important in the formation of what we learn in school as the westward expansion, right? But it's the colonization of the rest of the North American continent. And really, it's very much in play today in 2023. But how many Americans have heard about the Society of the Cincinnati? It's mostly based in New England, by the way, the New England Power Centers. And I have a lot of the old books that have been pulled off the shelves. I have access to them. I could read their records. I could read the list of contributors and the officers within that organization, because everybody's like, Freemasonics, this, Teutonic Knights, but society. Let's open up our minds to some other groups, right? Instead of just repeating in the echo chamber the same old, same old. The Society of the Cincinnati, or Cincinnatus, if you want. Okay, another couple books. It's quite formidable tome. It's called The Sacred Towers of the Axis Mundi. Mundi meaning axis, meaning the like an axle, the beginning, the center, and the mundi of the world. Right, certain man-made monuments are axis or axi mundi. Their orientations, part of the what he calls alchemical layout of the surrounding world, the material, the geographic world. It's used for surveying. You saw earlier how Washington, D.C. was laid out, and there's these stones that demarcate the diamond shape of it, and same with Chico. And it's, you can see the Freemasonic foundations, literally and figuratively, that we don't need to repeat here over and over again. Oh, it's the Freemasons. Come on, let's dig a little bit deeper, literally and figuratively. So anyway, it's called True History Revealed. This is a good one. Buy the whole set. He's worthy of our support. It's just a little bit under 500 pages. And let me conclude with I don't know how old this guy is, but he obviously has been influenced by the pioneering efforts of Cort Lindahl, I think. And it's also a large format book. And you'll like this one. His name is, maybe I'll try to find him, locate him, and bring him here on the show. His name is James Allen Egan, Egan. And the title of this book is John Dee's America. Subtitled, The Idea of America Came from the Mind of John Dee. You know about 007, blah, 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 Queen Elizabeth. All right, let's move on. We've heard that already. If you're a newbie, fine. Congratulations. You're on the right track. But if you've been reading this material for the last couple decades, 3 decades, 50 years maybe, it's time to break new ground. And this book does it. So I will, without reservation, recommend. It's almost 600 pages. These books are monsters, and they're great, and it's very exciting. I'm really happy to be able to promote this literature, this growing body of literature that's going to help us recover from our the squalor that we've been pushed into because of our lack of knowledge, our lack of self-knowledge, right? Historical knowledge, historically, empirically grounded knowledge. You can still read about UFOs and Lemurians and all that fun stuff, and you can read about your sexy Nazis and Werner von Braun and all, that's all. And you can read Assassinations to the Cow Come Home. But at a certain point, we have to fundamentally reevaluate and reestablish our connection to the true history of what later became the United States of America. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you we are on our way. So I'm so happy to be able to share this information with you early in 2023. I'll try to reschedule something with Mr. Bradbury Cort Lindahl, and I'll try to bring some other authors on here who I feel are doing marvelous work, right? We don't have to despair. There's a lot of people among us who are probing a lot of areas that are required for our national recovery. And the whole world's going to benefit from it. The whole world's going to benefit if we stop funding all the retired generals at their little think tanks, the retired generals clubs, right, who say, oh, it's war, it's Chinese. They'll blame anybody in order to keep the contracts going. That model is to put it lightly, not sustainable. It's suicidal. Okay. Thank you very much for your indulgence. I'll have something even better for you on Thursday. Thank you. Bye.